In a room full of killers, silence is usually a death sentence. But for Leo Moretti, silence was his prison. He sat at the head table of New York's most exclusive restaurant, surrounded by men who feared his father, Don Salvatore, more than God himself. Yet not one of them looked at Leo. To them, the Don's mute son was a broken ghost, ashamed to be ignored, until a waitress named Flora, tired, broke, and terrified, did the one thing nobody else dared to do. She looked him in the eye and signed a single word. That simple hand gesture didn't just break the silence, it started a war that would tear the city apart. Because, as Flora was about to find out, Leo wasn't just silent. He was listening. And he knew where all the bodies were buried. Flora Vance adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric dug into her waist. It was 8:07 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan, and the Gilded Lily was packed. This wasn't a place for tourists. This was a place for power. Politicians, hedge fund managers, and men who dealt in businesses that didn't have names on the stock market. Flora had been working here for 6 months. She needed the tips. Her mother's medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter of her tiny Queens apartment like a snowdrift, threatening to bury them both. She kept her head down, her eyes on the trays, and her mouth shut. That was the first rule of the Gilded Lily. You see everything, but you witness nothing. "Table 4 is yours tonight, Vance," the floor manager, a sweating man named Greg, hissed as he passed her station. "And for God's sake, don't mess it up. It's the Morettis." Flora's stomach dropped. The Morettis. Everyone knew the name. Salvatore Sal. Moretti was the kind of man who could have a building condemned or a person disappear with a single phone call. He controlled the docks, the unions, and half the police force. "Understood," Flora whispered, smoothing her hair. She picked up the water pitcher and made her way to table 4, the best table in the house, secluded in a velvet-roped alcove. There were 6 men at the table. At the head sat Sal Moretti. He was a mountain of a man, wearing a suit that cost more than Flora made in a year. He was laughing loudly, a cigar clamped between his teeth, slapping the back of the man next to him, his underboss, Marco Rossi. Marco was handsome in a reptilian sort of way, slick hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. The other men were soldiers, laughing whenever Sal laughed, drinking whenever Sal drank. And then there was the young man on Sal's left. He was pale, with dark, curly hair that fell over his forehead. He looked to be about 22, the same age as Flora. He wore a suit, but it hung loosely on his frame. While the rest of the table roared with laughter and clinked glasses of scotch, he sat perfectly still. His hands were folded on the white tablecloth. His gaze was fixed on the flickering candle in the center of the table. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody offered him a drink. Nobody even acknowledged he was there. It was as if he were a piece of furniture, or a ghost haunting the feast. Flora approached the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I start you off with some water?" Sal Moretti stopped laughing. He looked up at her, his eyes like cold stones. "Sparkling for the table, and a bottle of the 95 Barolo." "Of course, sir." Flora moved around the table, pouring the sparkling water. When she reached the young man on the left, she paused. He didn't look up. He was staring at the menu, but he hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes. "And for you, sir?" Flora asked softly. The table went quiet. Marco Rossi let out a short, cruel snort. "Don't bother, sweetheart," Marco sneered, swirling his scotch. "The prince doesn't talk. Brains as broken as his voice box." Sal didn't defend his son. He just took a drag of his cigar and looked away, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Just pour him water. He won't ask for anything else. Flora felt a surge of hot anger. It wasn't just the rudeness, it was the dehumanization. She looked at the young man, Leo. She remembered the staff whispering his name. He hadn't flinched at Marco's insult, but Flora saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the tablecloth. He heard them. He understood them. He was just trapped in the silence they had built around him. Flora poured the water. As she pulled the pitcher back, she caught Leo's eye. His eyes were a striking, piercing blue, filled with a profound intelligence and a deep, aching loneliness. She hesitated. She shouldn't do this. She needed this job. But the memory of her younger brother, Sam, flashed in her mind. Sam had been deaf. Before he passed away 3 years ago, they had communicated entirely through American Sign Language, ASL. She knew what it felt like to be shouted over, to be treated like an inconvenience, because the world refused to learn your language. Flora took a breath. She blocked out the scary men in the expensive suits. She looked right at Leo. Quickly, subtly, keeping her hands low near her apron so the others wouldn't immediately see, she signed, "Are you okay?" Leo's eyes widened. The shock on his face was visceral. He stared at her hands, then up at her face, as if he were seeing color for the first time in a black and white world. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a trembling hand, Leo lifted his fingers from the tablecloth. "The food is terrible," he signed back. Flora almost laughed out loud. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She signed back, "Order the burger. It's not on the menu, but it's the best thing we have." Leo's lips quirked upward, a genuine, microscopic smile. "What the hell are you doing?" The voice boomed like thunder. Flora froze. She turned to see Sal Moretti staring at her. The entire table had gone deadly silent. Marco Rossi was watching her with narrowed, suspicious eyes. I was just taking his order, sir," Flora stammered. "With your hands." Sal stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He towered over her. "You throwing gang signs at my son?" "No, sir." Flora backed up, clutching the tray. "I was signing, ASL. I just asked him if he was okay." Sal looked down at Leo. Leo looked back at his father, his face returning to that stony, impassive mask. But there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "He doesn't know that crap," Marco scoffed. "We tried tutors when he was a kid. He never took to it. He's simple, Sal. You know that." Sal looked back at Flora. "Is that true? Did he answer you?" Flora looked at Leo. If she said yes, she proved Marco wrong. If she said yes, she might get fired, or worse. But if she said no, she left Leo back in the dark. "Yes," Flora said, her voice firm. "He told me the food here is terrible." The silence stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. The other soldiers looked terrified. Insulting the restaurant Sal chose? That was grounds for a beating. Then Sal Moretti threw his head back and laughed. It was a booming, genuine laugh that shook his belly. "He said the food is terrible?" Sal wiped a tear from his eye. "That sounds like a Moretti. I've been saying the risotto here tastes like paste for years." The tension in the room snapped. The soldiers laughed nervously because the boss was laughing. Even Marco forced a chuckle, though his eyes remained cold and fixated on Flora. "What's your name, girl?" Sal asked, sitting back down. "Flora. Flora Vance." "Flora," Sal grunted. "You stay at this table tonight. Nobody else serves us. You translate for the boy. If he wants a burger, you get him a burger." "Yes, sir." Flora hurried to the kitchen, her legs feeling like jelly. She didn't know it yet, but she had just walked into the middle of a conspiracy that had been festering for 20 years. By acknowledging Leo, she had just put a target on her own back. The rest of the dinner was a surreal blur. For the first time in his life, Leo Moretti was part of the conversation. Through Flora, he ordered the burger, rare, with extra pickles. Through Flora, he made a comment about the football game the men were discussing. Sal seemed delighted, treating Leo like a novelty toy he had just discovered in the attic. But Marco Rossi was seething. Every time Flora translated for Leo, Marco would interrupt. "Sal, we need to discuss the shipment from Jersey," he'd say. Or, "Don't let the girl distract you, boss." Flora tried to ignore him, focusing on Leo. As the night went on, their signing became more fluid. "Thank you," Leo signed when she brought the burger. "You're welcome," she signed back. "Your dad is loud." "You have no idea," Leo replied. "Be careful of the man on his right." "Marco." "Why?" Flora asked, pouring more wine. "He thinks I'm stupid. He thinks I don't know he's skimming money from the Jersey shipment." Flora nearly dropped the wine bottle. She froze, staring at Leo. He wasn't just making small talk. He was telling her secrets. Dangerous secrets. "Don't react," Leo signed quickly, his face impassive. "Just pour." Flora forced her hand to steady. She poured the wine into Marco's glass. Marco looked up at her, his eyes sliding over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "You're a smart girl, Flora," Marco said, his voice low and oily. "Sign language. Where'd you learn that?" "Boyfriend?" "My brother," Flora said curtly. "He passed away." "Tragic," Marco said, sounding bored. "Listen to me. Sal is having fun tonight, but tomorrow he'll forget you. Don't think this makes you special, and don't think the dummy has anything useful to say. He's just mimicry. Like a parrot." Flora looked at Leo. He was cutting his burger, seemingly oblivious. But she saw the slight tension in his jaw. He was seething. "I'll keep that in mind, sir," Flora said. By the time the check came, the bill was over $4,000. Sal threw a stack of cash on the table. "Keep the change," Sal said. It was easily a $500 tip. "And Flora, I like you. You got guts. Most people look at my boy like he's a broken window. You looked at him like a person." "He is a person, Mr. Moretti," Flora said. Sal stopped her. He looked at her, really looked at her, for a long moment. "Yeah, maybe I forgot that. Marco, give her the card." Marco stiffened. "Boss, give her the card, the private line." Reluctantly, Marco reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy, black business card with gold embossing. He handed it to Flora. His fingers brushed hers, and his grip lingered for a second too long, a silent threat. "If you need anything," Sal said, "you call. Nobody messes with friends of the Morettis." They stood up to leave. The restaurant staff practically bowed as they exited. Leo was the last to leave the table. He paused next to Flora. He didn't sign anything this time. He simply reached out and touched her hand, a fleeting, gentle contact. Then he slipped a napkin into her palm. Flora waited until they were out the door before she opened the napkin. Scrawled in messy handwriting, likely written blindly under the table while she wasn't looking, were 3 words. "They are listening." A chill ran down Flora's spine. She looked out the window. The black SUVs were pulling away into the rain. She had thought she was just being kind. She thought she was just doing her job. But as she crumpled the napkin in her fist, Flora realized she hadn't just served dinner. She had just been recruited into a silent war. Later that night, Flora walked home. Her apartment was only 10 blocks away, but the shadows felt deeper than usual. The rain slicked the streets, reflecting the neon signs of the bodegas. She clutched the cash in her pocket, enough to pay off the immediate medical debt. She turned onto her street and stopped. Her apartment building's front door was propped open. A black sedan was parked in front of the hydrant. It wasn't a police car. Flora's heart raced. She approached cautiously. As she got closer, she saw a man leaning against the hood of the car. He was smoking a cigarette. He wore a long trench coat. It was one of the soldiers from the dinner, the one who sat at the far end of the table. "Miss Vance," he said. He didn't look aggressive, but the air around him felt heavy. "Can I help you?" Flora asked, gripping her pepper spray in her pocket. "Mr. Rossi sent me," the soldier said. He flicked the cigarette into a puddle. "He wanted me to return something you dropped." He held out a small object. Flora squinted. It was her name tag. She touched her chest. She hadn't even realized it had fallen off. "Thanks," she said, reaching for it. The soldier pulled his hand back. "Marco also wanted me to give you a message. He says the mute kid is his problem to manage, not yours. He says if you know what's good for you, you'll lose that black card Sal gave you, and you'll forget tonight ever happened." "And if I don't?" Flora asked. Surprised by her own boldness, the soldier smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Then you won't just be serving the Moretti's, kid. You'll be buried by them." He dropped the name tag on the wet pavement, got into the car, and drove away. Flora stood alone in the rain, looking down at her name tag. It lay in the mud, soiled. She picked it up, wiped it off, and clenched her jaw. Marco Rossi had made a mistake. He thought fear would make her run. But he didn't know Flora Vance. He didn't know that when the world tried to silence her brother, she had screamed for him. She wasn't going to let Leo face the silence alone. She went inside, locked the door, and pulled out the black card. She didn't call Sal. Instead, she looked at the napkin Leo had given her. They are listening. If they were listening, then she needed to find a way to speak where they couldn't hear. 3 days passed. Flora went to work at the Gilded Lily, kept her head down, and served salads to men who wore watches worth more than her life. Every time the door chimed, she flinched, expecting Marco Rossi or his trench-coated thug to walk in. But nobody came. The silence was almost worse than the threat. It was the calm before a hurricane. On Friday night, the restaurant was chaotic. Flora was double-sat with 2 large parties. She was rushing past the host stand when the maitre d', a snooty man named Pierre, flagged her down. "Vance," Pierre sniffed, holding a small brown paper package. "A courier just dropped this off. Said it was for the girl who speaks with her hands." Very odd. Flora's heart slammed against her ribs. She took the package. It was heavy. "Did you see who dropped it off?" "A kid on a bike. Keep your personal mail at home, Vance." Flora shoved the package into her apron pocket. She burned with curiosity for the rest of her shift. Finally, at midnight, she clocked out and hid in the staff bathroom to open it. Inside the brown paper was a book. It was an old, leather-bound copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. Flora frowned. She flipped through the pages. It seemed normal until she reached page 42. Highlighted in yellow was a single sentence. All human wisdom is contained in these 2 words: wait and hope. Tucked into the spine of the book was a library slip for the New York Public Library on 5th Avenue. On the back of the slip, a time was stamped. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Room 315. Flora didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she took the subway into the city, clutching the book like a shield. The New York Public Library was a cathedral of silence, the perfect place for Leo. She walked into the Rosemane reading room. It was vast, with high ceilings painted with clouds. Rows of long oak tables were filled with students and scholars. Flora scanned the room. She saw him. Leo was sitting at the far end of a table near the reference section. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore a grey hoodie and jeans, looking like any other college student, except for the intense, predatory alertness in his eyes. He was reading a stack of financial newspapers. Flora sat across from him. He didn't look up immediately. He finished highlighting a row of numbers in the Financial Times, then capped his marker. He looked at her, his blue eyes clear and sharp. "You came?" he signed. His movements were small, kept close to his chest so no one else would notice. "You gave me a book about revenge," Flora signed back. "I figured it was important." A flicker of amusement crossed Leo's face. "It is. My father loves that book. He thinks he is the Count. But he is wrong. He is the one being betrayed." Flora glanced around. The library was quiet, but she felt exposed. "Marco," she signed. Leo nodded. "Marco thinks I am stupid. He thinks because I am mute, I am deaf and blind. But I see everything. I handle the books." Flora frowned. "The books? I thought Marco handled the business." Leo's hands moved faster now, graceful and precise. "Marco handles the street, the enforcement, the face. But my father trusts me with the numbers because he thinks I have no one to tell. I have a photographic memory, Flora. I memorize the ledgers. The real ledgers." Flora leaned in. "What did you find?" Leo paused. He looked around the room, scanning for threats. Then he looked back at her, his expression grim. "Marco is skimming," Leo signed. "But not just skimming. He is building a war chest. He is stealing millions from the unions and the construction contracts. He is funneling the money into shell companies in the Cayman Islands, companies that are not owned by the Moretti family." "Why?" Flora asked. "To buy loyalty," Leo signed. "He is paying off my father's captains. He is buying the police. He is preparing to take the throne, and when he does, he will kill my father. And he will kill me." Flora felt a cold sweat break out on her neck. She was just a waitress. This was a Shakespearean tragedy playing out in real time, and she was standing on the trapdoor. "Why don't you tell your dad?" Flora signed furiously. "Write it down. Show him." Leo shook his head sadly. "My father loves Marco. Marco saved his life 10 years ago. If I write a note, Marco will spin it. He will say I am crazy or jealous, or that I don't understand business. Marco is a master manipulator. He speaks my father's language, violence and loyalty. I have no voice." Leo reached across the table and tapped Flora's hand. The contact sent a jolt through her. "That is why I need you," he signed. "You are not in the game. You are invisible. I need you to be my voice." "Me?" Flora pulled her hand back. "Leo, I serve pasta. A guy threatened to bury me in the foundation of a building 3 days ago." "I know," Leo signed. "I am sorry. But you are the only person in 20 years who looked me in the eye. I trust you." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. "This contains the proof," Leo signed. "The bank transfers, the dates, the names of the captains he has bought. But I cannot give it to my father. He won't open a USB drive. He is old school. He needs to hear it. He needs to see the betrayal with his own eyes." "So what's the plan?" Flora asked, staring at the silver drive. "The Unity Gala," Leo signed. "Next Saturday. All the 5 families will be there. Marco plans to make his move soon after. We have to expose him at the gala, in front of everyone, where he cannot lie, where he cannot kill us immediately." "How?" "I have a plan," Leo signed. "But you will have to be brave. Braver than you have ever been." Flora looked at the USB drive. She thought of her mother's medical bills. She thought of the way Marco Rossi had looked at her, like she was a piece of meat to be discarded. She thought of her brother, Sam, and how the world had ignored him too. She covered the USB drive with her hand. "I'm in," she signed. Leo smiled. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, making him look young and hopeful. "Good," he signed. "Now we have to go. Don't leave at the same time as me." "And Flora?" "Yes." "The man in the trench coat. His name is Vinny. He's following you. Go out the back exit." Flora froze. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked quickly toward the rear of the library. As she pushed through the heavy doors, she glanced back. Leo was already gone, vanished like a ghost in the stacks. The week leading up to the Unity Gala was a nightmare of paranoia for Flora. She saw Vinny, the trenchcoat soldier, everywhere. He was outside her apartment. He was drinking coffee across the street from the Gilded Lily. He never approached her, just watched. It was psychological warfare. Flora spent her nights studying the contents of the USB drive on her old laptop. Leo was right. He was a genius. The files were a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts, but Leo had created a map for her to follow. Marco Rossi wasn't just stealing. He was selling the Moretti family out to the Bratva, the Russian mob. He was selling shipping routes and police contacts. It was high treason in the underworld. On Wednesday, things escalated. Flora arrived at work to find the manager, Greg, waiting for her with 2 police officers. "That's her," Greg said, refusing to look Flora in the eye. "That's the thief." "What?" Flora dropped her bag. "Greg, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," one of the officers said, stepping forward. He was a heavy-set man, with a face like a bulldog. "We got a tip that you've been stealing credit card numbers from high-end clients." "That's a lie," Flora shouted. "We searched your locker," the cop said. He held up a plastic bag. Inside was a skimming device. Flora gasped. "I've never seen that in my life. Someone planted that." "Save it for the judge," the cop said. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully behind her back. "Flora Vance, you're under arrest." As they marched her out of the restaurant in handcuffs, Flora saw a black sedan parked across the street. The window rolled down just an inch. Marco Rossi's face was visible, a smirk playing on his lips. He raised a glass of scotch in a mock toast. He was removing her from the board. If she was in jail, she couldn't help Leo. They threw her in a holding cell at the precinct. It was cold and smelled of urine and bleach. Flora sat on the metal bench, fighting back tears. They had taken her phone. They had taken her purse. But they hadn't found the USB drive. She had sewn it into the hem of her jeans the night before, a trick she learned from a spy movie. Hours passed. Flora paced the cell. If she didn't get out, the gala would happen without her. Leo would be alone. Marco would win. Suddenly, the heavy metal door buzzed and clicked open. A man in an expensive suit walked in. He wasn't a cop. He carried a briefcase. "Flora Vance?" he asked. "Who are you?" "My name is Arthur Pendleton. I'm your attorney." "I can't afford an attorney," Flora said. "And I didn't call one." Arthur smiled. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a release form. "No, you didn't. But an anonymous benefactor paid your bail, and the charges have been complicated." Complicated. It seems the security footage from the restaurant that showed you planting the device has been corrupted. And the skimming device itself? It has fingerprints on it. But not yours. They belong to a known associate of the Bratva. Flora's eyes widened. Leo. He had done it. From his silence, from his isolation, he had reached out and manipulated the system. "You're free to go, Miss Vance," Arthur said. "But my client suggests you do not go home. Your apartment is compromised." "Where should I go?" Arthur handed her a key card. "The Ritz-Carlton. Room 404. It's under the name Ms. Dantes." Flora took the key. Dantes. The Count of Monte Cristo. She walked out of the precinct into the cool night air. A black town car was waiting. She got in. not asking questions. The car took her to the hotel. When she entered room 404, she found a dress laid out on the bed. It was a stunning, floor-length gown of midnight blue silk. Next to it was a pair of heels and a masquerade mask with silver feathers. There was a note on the pillow. "The gala is a masquerade this year. Marco thinks you are in a cage. He thinks he has won. Tomorrow night, we show him that the dead can speak." El Flora ran her fingers over the silk. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the weapon Leo Moretti was going to use to kill the king. But the note had a second page. Flora picked it up, and her blood ran cold. P.S. There is one thing I did not tell you in the library. The reason I am mute. Flora sat on the edge of the bed, reading the messy handwriting. I am not physically mute. My vocal cords work. But when I was 12, I walked into my father's office. I saw Marco Rossi strangling a man. It was my uncle, my father's brother. Marco saw me. He put a gun to my head. He told me that if I ever spoke a single word to my father, to anyone, he would kill my mother. He held the gun to my head for an hour, describing exactly how he would do it. My mother died of cancer 2 years later, but the silence had become a habit, a survival mechanism, and then a trap. I was afraid that if I spoke, even after she died, the monster would come back. Marco thinks he broke me. He thinks I am a frightened child. Tomorrow I will show him that he didn't break me. He just sharpened me. Flora dropped the letter. The cruelty was unimaginable. A 12-year-old boy, terrified into silence, carrying the weight of a murder for a decade. A knock on the hotel door made her jump. She crept to the peephole. It was room service. Or so it looked. She opened the door with the chain on. "Yes?" "Compliments of Mr. Rossi," a voice growled. A heavy boot kicked the door. The chain snapped like a twig. 2 men burst into the room. Vinny, the trench-coat man, and another thug. "Did you think we wouldn't track the lawyer?" Vinny sneered. He pulled a knife. "Marco wants to tie up loose ends before the party." Flora scrambled backward, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. She swung it wildly. It connected with Vinny's shoulder, but he just laughed. He lunged, tackling her onto the bed. The knife glinted under the chandelier light. "Say good night, sweetheart," Vinny hissed. Bang! The sound was deafening in the small room. Vinny froze. A look of shock crossed his face. He slumped sideways, rolling off Flora. Standing in the doorway of the bathroom, holding a silenced pistol with a shaking hand, was Leo. He was breathing hard. He wore black tactical gear, a stark contrast to his usual suits. He stepped over the second thug, who was already unconscious on the floor. Leo must have been in the room before Flora arrived, waiting. Leo looked at Flora. He checked her for injuries with his eyes. Then he holstered the gun. "Are you okay?" He signed, his hands trembling slightly. Flora nodded, gasping for air. You shot him." "He is not dead. Just the shoulder," Leo signed. "But we have to move. Marco knows where we are. The war has started early." He reached out a hand to help her up. Flora took it. His grip was iron hard. "Leo," she whispered, "you saved my life." Leo looked at the unconscious men, then back at her. His eyes were dark and dangerous. "No," he signed. "Tonight we save everyone." He kicked Vinny's gun under the bed, grabbed the blue dress, and shoved it into a bag. "Put on the coat," he commanded, in sign. "We are leaving. The gala starts in 2 hours, and we have an entrance to make." Flora threw on the coat. As they ran down the fire escape into the New York night, she realized there was no turning back. She was running with the wolf now. The Pierre Hotel ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. It was the venue for the Unity Gala, the one night a year where the 5 families of New York pretended to be legitimate businessmen. There were no guns visible, only tuxedos. There were no threats, only toasts. But the air was thick with the scent of blood and ambition. Flora stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand resting on Leo's arm. She felt like an imposter in the midnight blue silk gown. The mask covered the upper half of her face, its silver feathers tickling her temples. But she felt naked. Beneath the dress, taped to her thigh, was the USB drive. It felt heavier than lead. "I can't breathe," she whispered. Leo, looking devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo and a simple black domino mask, squeezed her arm. He didn't sign. He couldn't risk it here. Too many eyes. Instead, he guided her down the stairs with a steady, confident rhythm. He wasn't the trembling boy at the restaurant anymore. Tonight, he moved like a prince, returning to claim a stolen kingdom. They descended into the crowd. The room was a sea of masks and expensive perfume. Waiters moved like ghosts with trays of champagne. Leo steered them toward the edge of the dance floor. He leaned close to her ear, the warmth of his breath making her shiver. 3 o'clock, he whispered. It was the first time she had heard his voice. It was rough, unused, like gravel grinding together, but deep and resonant. Flora almost stumbled. She looked at him, her eyes wide behind her mask. He ignored her shock, his gaze fixed on a table near the stage. Flora looked. There was Sal Moretti. He looked older tonight. His skin was grey, his eyes dull. He wasn't laughing. He was drinking heavily, his hand shaking slightly as he held the glass. Standing behind him, hand on Sal's shoulder like a vulture, was Marco Rossi. Marco wasn't wearing a mask. He wanted everyone to see his face. He wanted them to know who the real power was. He was whispering into Sal's ear, and Sal was nodding slowly, defeatedly. "He's drugging him," Flora realized, horror dawning on her. That's why Sal looks like that. Marco is keeping him sedated. Leo's grip on her arm tightened painfully. He had seen it too. The slow poisoning of the king. "We have to get to the AV booth," Leo whispered again. His voice cracked, the strain of speaking after 10 years evident. "We need the screen." They moved through the crowd, but the room was a minefield. Marco had security everywhere, men with earpieces scanning the crowd. They weren't looking for a mute boy. They were looking for a terrified waitress and a runaway son. They weren't expecting a power couple in couture. Suddenly, a hand shot out and grabbed Flora's wrist. She froze. A man in a red mask blocked their path. It was one of the captains from the Genovese family. "Care to dance, beautiful?" he slurred, smelling of gin. Flora's heart hammered. If she spoke, her accent might give her away. If she refused, he might cause a scene. Leo stepped in. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hand on the captain's chest and shoved. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a precise, violent jolt to the solar plexus. The captain doubled over, gasping for air, unable to scream. Leo swept Flora onto the dance floor before the man could recover. They blended into the waltz, spinning among the other couples. "You're crazy," Flora hissed, following Leo's lead. He was a surprisingly good dancer, his movements fluid and commanding. "Distraction," Leo mouthed. As they turned, Flora saw Marco Rossi scanning the room. He was agitated. He kept checking his phone. Vinny hadn't called. The loose ends hadn't been tied. Marco knew something was wrong. "He knows we're coming," Flora said. "He hopes we're dead," Leo corrected. They danced closer to the stage. The AV booth was to the left, tucked behind a heavy velvet curtain. "When the music stops," Leo whispered. "You go left, I go right." I'll draw them off." "No," Flora said. "That's suicide. Marco will kill you." "He's going to try anyway," Leo said. His blue eyes locked onto hers through the mask. "Flora, trust me. Get to the booth. Plug in the drive. Play the file labeled Judas. Lock the door." The music swelled to a crescendo. The violins screamed. "Now," Leo commanded. He broke away from her. He didn't run. He walked straight toward the center of the room, directly into Marco Rossi's line of sight. Flora slipped into the shadows. She hiked up her dress and sprinted for the velvet curtain. Behind her, the music stopped abruptly. Not because the song was over, but because a scream cut through the air. "There!" Marco's voice roared over the microphone. "The boy! Seize him!" Flora didn't look back. She heard the crash of a table overturning. She heard shouting. She threw herself behind the curtain and found the AV booth door. It was locked. Panic clawed at her throat. She fumbled with her hair, pulling out a bobby pin. "Come on, come on!" She jammed it into the lock, wiggling it the way Sam had taught her when they used to sneak into the roof of their building. Click. The door swung open. Inside, a startled technician in a headset spun around. "Hey, you can't be in here!" Flora didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy roll of gaffer tape from the desk and swung it. It connected with the technician's temple. He slumped out of his chair. "Sorry," she whispered. She slammed the door and locked it. Her hands were shaking violently. She could hear chaos outside, the sound of fists on flesh. She ripped the USB drive from her thigh. She scanned the mixing board. There was a laptop connected to the massive projector screen that hung above the stage. She jammed the USB drive in. The computer chimed. A folder opened. File. Judas.mp4. Outside, the noise was deafening. Someone was pounding on the AV booth door. "Open up! Open the door or we shoot through it!" Flora clicked the file. Nothing happened. "No, no, no," she sobbed. The loading bar spun. Buffering. The door hinges groaned. They were kicking it in. "Come on!" Flora screamed at the screen. On the stage, the projector flickered to life. Moments earlier, on the ballroom floor, Leo Moretti was surrounded. 6 of Marco's men had encircled him. The guests, hundreds of the most dangerous people in America, had formed a wide ring, watching with morbid curiosity. Marco Rossi stood on the stage, microphone in hand. He looked like a triumphant emperor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marco boomed, his voice smooth despite the sweat on his brow, "I apologize for the interruption. It seems my poor, disturbed nephew has off his medication again. He's confused. Violent." Sal Moretti sat at the head table, blinking. He tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. "Leo," he croaked. "Marco, don't hurt him." "It's for his own good, Sal," Marco said soothingly. He signaled to the guards. "Take him out the back. Quietly." The guards moved in. Leo raised his hands. He wasn't fighting. He was staring at the blank screen above the stage. Wait for it, he thought. Flora, wait for it. The lead guard grabbed Leo's arm. "Let's go, dummy." Suddenly, the massive screen behind Marco exploded with light. A collective gasp went through the room. The video wasn't high production. It was grainy surveillance footage, but the timestamp was clear. October 14th, 2025. It showed a loading dock. It showed Marco Rossi. He was shaking hands with a man with a distinct tattoo on his neck, Vladimir Volkov, the head of the Russian Bratva. The audio crackled to life, booming through the ballroom speakers. "The shipment is yours, Vlad." Marco's voice on the recording was crystal clear. "Moretti doesn't suspect a thing. Once the old man is gone, I hand over the unions to you. Just make sure the hit looks like a heart attack." The room went deathly silent. On stage, Marco froze. His face drained of color. He spun around, staring at his own betrayal broadcast in 40-foot high definition. "Turn it off!" Marco screamed, his voice cracking. "It's a deep fake! It's AI! Cut the power!" But the video changed. Now it was a spreadsheet. Rows and rows of numbers. Bank accounts in the Caymans. Names of captains in the room who were on Marco's payroll. A murmur of rage rippled through the crowd. Men were reaching into their jackets. Marco realized he was losing control. He pulled a gun from his waistband, a violation of the gala's sacred truce. He pointed it at the AV booth. "Vinny, break down that door and kill her!" Then he turned the gun on Sal Moretti. "Nobody moves!" Marco shrieked. "I'll kill him! I swear to God, I'll kill the old man!" Sal sat frozen, staring at the screen. The fog of the drugs was burning away, replaced by the cold fire of betrayal. The guards holding Leo hesitated. They looked at Marco, then at the screen, then at Sal. In that split second of hesitation, Leo moved. He didn't attack the guards. He walked forward. He walked right up to the edge of the stage. He looked up at Marco, who was trembling with the gun pointed at Sal's head. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the projector. Leo took a breath. He filled his lungs with air, expanding a chest that had been silent for 10 years. "Put the gun down, Marco." The voice was not a whisper this time. It was a roar. It was raw, guttural, and undeniably powerful. It echoed off the gold leaf ceiling. Sal Moretti's head snapped up. He looked at his son. Tears welled in his eyes. "Leo?" Marco stared at Leo, his mouth open. You can talk." "I can talk," Leo said, his voice gaining strength with every syllable. He climbed the stairs onto the stage, step by steady step. "I have been able to talk for 10 years, but I stayed silent, because I knew if I spoke, you would kill me. Just like you killed Uncle Joey." A shockwave went through the 5 families. The murder of Joey Moretti was a cold case. Everyone thought it was a rival gang. "Liar!" Marco screamed, backing up, keeping the gun on Sal. "He's lying! He's crazy!" "I was 12, Leo continued, stepping closer. He was 10 feet away now. "You strangled him with a piano wire in the study. You were wearing a blue tie. Joey scratched you on the left wrist. You still have the scar." Marco instinctively glanced at his left wrist. That was the mistake. Sal Moretti, the old lion, moved with a speed that defied his age and the drugs in his system. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and plunged it into Marco's thigh. Marco screamed and fired the gun. Bang! The bullet went wide, shattering a crystal vase. Leo lunged. He tackled Marco, driving him into the floor of the stage. The gun skittered away. They rolled, punching and clawing. Marco was stronger, desperate, fighting for his life. He got his hands around Leo's throat. "I should have killed you when you were a kid," Marco spat, squeezing. "You useless, broken freak." Leo's vision began to blur. Black spots danced in his eyes. He couldn't breathe. Then a sound cut through the chaos, a high-pitched feedback whine. Everyone looked up. Standing on top of the AV booth, holding a microphone she had ripped from the console, was Flora. She had climbed out the ventilation hatch. Her dress was torn, her mask was gone, and her hair was wild. "Get off him!" she screamed into the mic. She threw the heavy microphone stand. It sailed through the air, an ungainly, desperate projectile. It didn't hit Marco, but it smashed into the stage lights above them. Sparks rained down. The distraction broke Marco's focus. Leo bucked his hips, throwing Marco off. He grabbed the loose gun from the floor. He stood up, leveling the weapon at Marco's chest. Marco scrambled backward, crab-walking until he hit the podium. He looked out at the crowd. No one moved to help him. The captains he had bribed were looking at their shoes. The Russians were gone. He was alone. "Leo," Marco panted, holding up his hands. "Leo, listen, we're family. I raised you. I protected you." "You silenced me," Leo said. His voice was steady now, cold. But you didn't listen. If you had, you would have known one thing." "What?" Marco whimpered. "I never forget a debt." Leo didn't shoot. Instead, he lowered the gun. He turned to his father. Sal Moretti stood up. He pulled the knife from the table again. He looked at Marco with eyes that were no longer dull. They were the eyes of the Don. "Leo," Sal said softly, "give me the gun." Leo handed the pistol to his father. Sal looked at Marco. "You broke my son's voice. You broke my trust. You broke the rules." "Sal, please," Marco begged. "I can fix this. I have the money. The Caymans—" "I don't want the money," Sal said. "I want silence." Sal didn't shoot him. That would be too quick. He nodded to the guards, his loyal guards, who had finally realized which way the wind was blowing. "Take him to the basement," Sal ordered. "And cut out his tongue. If he likes silence so much, let him have it." As the guards dragged a screaming Marco Rossi away, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had finally called the cops. Leo didn't watch Marco go. He turned to the AV booth. Flora was climbing down, shaking. Leo jumped off the stage and ran to her. He caught her just as her legs gave out. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. "You spoke," she wept, clutching his torn tuxedo jacket. "Leo, you spoke." "Because of you," he rasped, holding her tighter than he had ever held anything in his life. "Only because of you." The police burst through the doors. The gala was over. The war was over. But as the flashbulbs of the press popped, capturing the image of the mob prince holding the waitress in the ruins of the Pierre Hotel, Flora knew their story was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the night of the Unity Gala, but the echoes of that evening still reverberated through the streets of New York. The fall of Marco Rossi had been swift and absolute. The subsequent power vacuum had been violent, but brief. Sal Moretti had ruthlessly purged his organization of Marco's loyalists, but he hadn't done it with the chaotic bloodshed of the past. He had done it with surgical precision, guided by a new advisor, his son. It was a crisp spring evening. Flora stood outside the Gilded Lily. The "closed for private event" sign hung on the door, just as it had that first night she met Leo. But this time she wasn't walking in through the service entrance. She wasn't wearing an apron that smelled of dish soap. She wore a cream-colored blazer and tailored trousers. She pushed the heavy oak doors open and walked into the dining room. The restaurant was empty, save for one table. Table 4. Sal Moretti sat there, sipping an espresso. He looked older, frailer. The cane leaning against his chair was new, but the darkness that had clouded his eyes at the gala was gone. Sitting opposite him was Leo. He was reading a dossier, making notes with a fountain pen. He looked up as Flora approached. "You're late," Leo said. His voice still sent a thrill through her. It was deep, textured with a rasp that hinted at the years of disuse. But it was strong. He spoke with a deliberate cadence, weighing every word, as if he knew the value of sound better than anyone else. "Traffic on the bridge," Flora said, smiling. She walked over and kissed his cheek. "And I had to stop by the hospital. My mom was discharged today." "That is good news," Sal said. His voice was gravelly. He looked at Flora with a strange expression. Respect, perhaps even a hint of fear. She was, after all, the woman who had saved his life and his empire. "How is the bill?" "Paid in full," Flora said, sitting down. "Thank you, Sal." "Don't thank me," Sal grunted, waving a hand. "Leo handles the accounts now. I just drink the coffee." Leo closed the dossier. "The transition is complete, Pop. The unions are clean. We've divested from the docks. The tech startups in Silicon Alley are yielding a 300% return. We are legitimate." Sal sighed, looking around the empty restaurant. "Legitimate." My father would spin in his grave. No running numbers? No protection rackets? No, Leo said firmly. We have enough power without the blood. Marco proved that greed creates weakness. We are building something that lasts. Sal looked at his son. For years he had looked at Leo and seen a broken vessel. Now he saw a fortress. You're a better man than me, Leo, Sal whispered. He stood up slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. And a smarter one. You were listening while I was just shouting. Sal looked at Flora. Take care of him, Flora. He talks too much now. It's annoying. Flora laughed. I'll do my best, Sal. The old Don walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. At the door, he paused and looked back. The burger is still terrible, by the way. Then he was gone. Flora and Leo were left alone in the candlelight. The silence between them wasn't heavy or fearful anymore. It was comfortable, intimate. Leo reached across the table and took her hand. Are you ready? For what? To quit, Leo said. Flora blinked. Quit what? I haven't worked here in 6 months. Not the job, Leo said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out a heavy set of keys. I bought the building, Flora. The Gilded Lily. It's yours. Flora stared at the keys. Leo, I can't accept this. This is a multi-million-dollar property. You're not accepting a gift, Leo said intensely. You're accepting a responsibility. You said the food was terrible. You said the staff was treated like ghosts. Fix it. Make it a place where people are heard. Make it a place where the waitress is the most important person in the room. Flora's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched the keys. She thought of Sam. She thought of all the times she had felt invisible. I'll rename it, she whispered. To what? The silent partner, she smiled. Leo laughed, that rare, beautiful sound that he had only recently learned to share with the world. He stood up and walked around the table, pulling her into his arms. I have a meeting with the mayor in an hour, Leo said, brushing a stray hair from her face. But I have something to say to you first. You can just tell me, Flora said. Leo shook his head. He stepped back. His face softened, losing the hard edge of the mob boss and returning to the gentle soul she had met in the library. He raised his hands. I love you, he signed. It was a simple gesture, 3 movements. But in the quiet of the restaurant, it was louder than any shout. It was a reminder that no matter how powerful they became, no matter how much noise they made in the world, the truth of their bond would always be found in the silence. Flora raised her hands, her fingers trembling with emotion. I love you too, she signed back. Leo kissed her, a promise sealed not in blood, but in hope. Outside, the sirens of New York wailed and the city roared, but in the center of the storm, they had found their peace. The ghost was gone, the prince had risen, and the waitress had found her voice. That is the story of Flora and Leo, a reminder that the quietest people often have the loudest minds. We often think that power comes from shouting, from intimidation, or from force. But as Leo showed us, real power comes from observation. It comes from patience. And sometimes, the strongest connection you can make with another human being doesn't require a single spoken word. Flora didn't save Leo because she was a soldier or a spy. She saved him because she was the only one who bothered to listen when he wasn't speaking. In a world that never stops talking, never underestimate the power of silence. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic tale of betrayal, love, and redemption. If this story hooked you, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Did you see the twist with Marco coming? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Feel free to share this video with a friend who loves a good thriller. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.